Hi everyone, welcome. Nice to see so many people here already. Almost 70 people already join us, and we expect many more. It's an honor to open this launch and also a discussion. I'm publishing editor of the Geography and Sustainability Research Department at Springer, and I'm the publisher responsible for the Springer Briefs in Research and Innovation Governance series. I work in the series together with our series editors who are here, Doris Schroeder and Kostas Yatridis Konstantinos. The series publishes compact books of approximately 50 to 125 pages, and they're called briefs for that reason, as they're shorter books, and they have a very fast publication time, production, 4 to 8 weeks. Our series has very high standards, and all titles peer-reviewed on governance activities and research innovation. And we give a medium for concise summaries and cutting-edge research, which also can have a professional appeal, like this book. The series has been very successful. Very pleased to be publishing it together with our series editors, and I'm pleased to have published Bernd Stahl's book on artificial intelligence for a better future. I think it's an exceptional title on ethics of AI and emerging technologies, and it's had already more than 12,000 downloads and 30 mentions in social media in only 1 month. So that's very exceptional. I'm pleased to have this high impact as part of the series and welcome new contributions. So today we'll briefly introduce it to you and have a discussion. And I would like to officially launch the book today with all of you, and I pass on the floor to Bernd.
Karen, it's one more time to me, just very briefly.
Oh, sorry.
Because I will now introduce the most important person at the book launch, which is Professor Bernd Stahl, the head of the Center for Computing and Social Responsibility in the UK. And like Juliana has said, it's exceptional to have 12,000 downloads in a few weeks. So over to you. What's done it? Your 3 minutes on the book.
Okay, well, firstly, thank you, Doris. Thank you to the panelists, and thank you to everybody who's here today. Summarizing a book in 3 minutes is, of course, a bit of a challenge, so I'll try to pick up some main points. The book is motivated by a lot of research happening in the Sherpa project predominantly, but also in work that we've done in other areas, including the Human Brain Project. And what it tries to do is give an overview of what we mean when we talk about AI, what the public discourse covers when we talk about the ethical, social, and human rights aspects of it, and what can be done about it. Now, a lot of things have been written about this, and I hope this book has a somewhat interesting and unique contribution. The starting point is the attempt to classify and categorize artificial intelligence. And looking at the discourse, but looking also at respondents, at case studies, at scenarios, we distinguish 3 main areas of technologies that fall under AI, but that are fundamentally very different. So on the one hand, we have narrow AI, which is typically implemented through machine learning, normally through deep neural networks and related technologies. Now, these technologies have particular characteristics that raise particular ethical issues. So they are typically opaque. It's difficult to understand what exactly happens within them. They require large amounts of data. And as a consequence, they raise questions around transparency, reliability, but also data protection and security. Now, that's one view of AI. A second one is the use of these technologies in broader socio-technical systems. So that's where we're looking at the use of machine learning technologies and related technologies in areas like transport, healthcare, education, and so on, where these technologies have consequences on the overall system in which they're employed. So this is where we're talking about autonomous vehicles and the security, where we're looking at questions around decisions around educational attainment, parole decisions in justice systems, and so on. And then finally, the third group of references to AI is to what we call artificial general intelligence. So these are systems that have human-like capabilities. They don't exist at the moment, and they may never, but they are very important in the sense that they are a reference point in the discussion around ethics of AI, and therefore I think we can't ignore them. So, but what I've just said is that there are different types of technologies, that they have very different types of consequences, and therefore the assumption that you can nail down very easily what is AI, what are the ethical issues, what are the human rights issues, and what can we do about them is probably problematic. So, and that's why we've chosen the perspective of the ecosystem and applied the metaphor of ecosystems to AI. And the reason for that is that ecosystems have certain characteristics that make them interesting from a perspective of understanding how technology has consequences for human beings. So the way I've phrased this in the book is in terms of human flourishing. So AI and AI ecosystems should be conducive to human flourishing. And what does this ecosystem metaphor help us? Well, ecosystems have components and characteristics that make it very difficult to come up with very simple linear causalities. So ecosystems have complicated internal relationships. They follow systems logics, so they're typically nonlinear. They have boundaries, they have an outside, they have an inside, but where exactly the boundary is often not clear. So in order for such ecosystems to be conducive to human flourishing, there are certain requirements that they have to fulfill. So they have to be clearly delineated. Then the ecosystem has to have a knowledge base. So the members of the ecosystem have to be able to understand not just the technology, but also the social and ethical consequences. And there need to be governance structures that incentivize the members of the ecosystem to ensure that the ecosystem develops in a way that is conducive to human flourishing. And in the book then, and in the Sherpa project, we've developed this in more detail into specific recommendations. But that's my potted summary, and that's what I hope is somewhat interesting. That's the perspective of the book that I hope can contribute to the AI ethics discourse. And with that, back to Doris.
Thanks a lot, Bernd. A very brief summary, excellent. We now have one question from each panelist, Stephanie first, then Katrin, and then Mark. And if you have follow-up questions from the audience on the same topic, we will collect them in the chat, but let's have one round from the panelists first. So Stephanie, please.
Thank you very much, Doris. Thank you, Bernd. Thank you, everyone. Bernd, so as a kickoff question, a little bit general question, and that would cover every possible discipline, I would say. What would you say is the most pressing issue today around AI ethics? Thank you.
So I would distinguish two types of issues that are worth exploring. On the one hand, there is a practical aspect to this. The question of what can we do right now? What should we do right now? What are interventions that need to be done in order to ensure that AI is conducive to human flourishing and that major ethical and human rights issues do not materialize? So these are questions around regulation, legislation, and at the moment we have very high level intervention on that. Of course, last week the European Commission has launched its proposal for the regulation. The FTC in America has just started a conversation around this. So there's a big topic around regulation, intervention, legislation. What can we do about this? That's one side, but I think on the conceptual side, there's also a very fundamental question around what do we not know about AI? What do we not know about these emerging technologies at this point? We know a lot. We know a lot about particular issues that people are concerned about. There's a lot of discussion around biases, discrimination, justice, fairness. But I think there are interesting questions as to what will these technologies allow us to do and what will they in future not allow us to do anymore? How will they structure our space of activities? How will they structure the way we interact with the world? And I think that is a very difficult question, and that is one that needs further attention.
Would you like to follow up, Stephanie, or shall we move to Katrin?
No, thank you very much, Doris.
Okay, Katrin, please.
Yeah, Bernd, in your book, you mentioned that AI work which ignores ethics cannot be excellent. That's very transparent, but also very strict. So what are the reasons for you to phrase it like this?
It's really a conceptual point around excellence. And the reason why I put this in the book is that we can observe in the scientific system at the moment, well, not just at the moment, for a long time, that there is a tendency to evaluate science, but also technology development, innovation purely on functional criteria. So you look at now, is this new technology, is it faster, is it better, can it do more things, or in terms of AI, can it deal with larger data sets, can it employ better algorithms? And that's an important part of excellence. But the point I'm trying to make here is that in order to understand the consequences of the use of a particular technology, or the consequences of the development or the research, one should look beyond the immediate boundaries of the lab of whatever technology is in question. And therefore, what I'm suggesting is that in order to have a rounded evaluation of excellence, it's not good enough to just look at the functional criteria, but one has to look at the broader consequences. And that includes, but not only, ethics as well.
So would you think that into this field also comes also questions about ethics by implementation, so that when certain tools or algorithms are being designed, that from the very beginning, ethical concepts are being integrated in a certain solution?
I think that is part of it. So there's this whole ethics by design, value-sensitive design discourse, where the attempt is to ensure that ethical considerations are embedded. I think it goes beyond that, though. So I think the driving force should be to look beyond the pure implementation of a particular technology and try to reach out beyond what is immediately planned and foreseen. Now, I realize that raises all sorts of epistemological questions. It's not trivial. We don't know exactly what the future holds. We cannot predict what exactly technology will do, but that shouldn't preclude us from engaging with these ideas very early on. And that's really, so I don't expect this to be perfect, but I think as part of an excellent evaluation, one has to demonstrate that one has to try to think beyond what one would normally do.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And just before we move to Mark, now that we are over 80 people, it will be Nitika who will look at the chat and ask the questions, because we won't have enough time to let everybody speak. So please put your questions into the chat, and then we'll give Nitika the floor soon. But now it's Mark.
Yeah, Bernd, you made a really good point just earlier in here that you know, there are things we don't know, that we don't really know how technology will change our interaction with the world, and that's sometimes a problem when we're too early in a way, you know, rather than too late as usual with assessing and evaluating technologies. Now, I really liked your approach in the book, and one question I have is that your ethics puts a lot of weight on human flourishing, and that's of course something I think many people will agree with. But what about the flourishing of other species? We are humans here, but there are other species on this earth. Are the environmental consequences, the consequences for other species for you also important, or is that excluded from the framework that you lay out in the book?
So the reason why I focused on the idea of flourishing here is that I felt that it covers the subject area well, and that it is open to interpretations as to what it means for an individual, a group, a society. So flourishing is something that I think we can probably all sign up to. This is something we want to achieve, but it doesn't really constrain us in terms of what or how exactly we can get there. But of course, the point you raised, namely the relationship between human flourishing and flourishing of other species, and also of the environment as a whole, is of course a relevant one. And the answer to that would be that humans, in order to flourish, need to live in an environment that is conducive to this flourishing. That means that we need to live in a world that we can live in, that we want to live in. And I think as part of that, that requires our natural environment to be at least in a state that it satisfies our needs. But I think beyond that also, we as humans flourish if we live in a sound environment as we possibly can. So I don't think there's a contradiction in this. So I think human flourishing in no way demeans the flourishing of other species, even though I realize that there may be difficult trade-offs which would need further elaboration at some point.